On a summer evening in 1980, at a polo dance at Stowell Park near Cirencester, Anna Wallace borrows Lady Celia Vestey's car and drives away. Andrew Morton later recorded that Wallace had been left as a virtual wallflower while Prince Charles socialized with Camilla Parker Bowles. The setting matters. Wallace wasn't watching a rumor from a newspaper column. She was Charles's girlfriend, a serious potential bride, and Camilla was in the room. A separate account places a similar humiliation at the Queen Mother's 80th birthday ball at Windsor Castle, where Charles arrived with Anna, but reportedly spent much of the evening dancing with Camilla. The date is variously given as June or July 1980, and Anna's exact words survive only through later biographies. The incident itself is repeated. Charles's attention moved toward Camilla, and Anna withdrew. By then, Charles had reportedly proposed to Anna twice. She had rejected both proposals. Camilla Parker Bowles stood at the center of the problem. Charles could court other women, but he kept returning to the same woman who understood his private world, matched his generation, and knew him before the royal marriage market turned him into a national product. That product had been assembled carefully. Charles was heir to the throne, a Cambridge graduate, a Royal Navy officer, a polo player, and, in the language of contemporary newspapers, the world's most eligible bachelor. The women who encountered him privately were less impressed by the packaging. Camilla Shand was born on 17th July 1947, 16 months before Charles. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, was a wine merchant and former military officer, and Camilla grew up inside the upper-class country house world of horses, hunting, polo, and overlapping aristocratic families. Charles was constitutionally more important. Camilla was socially familiar. That distinction explains more about their relationship than the later fairy tale language ever did. Charles and Camilla met in approximately 1970 or 1971, with most accounts crediting Lucia Santa Cruz, the daughter of Chile's former ambassador, with introducing them. Some biographies place the first meeting at a polo match at Windsor Park. The exact location is disputed, but the surrounding facts are consistent. They shared friends, horses, outdoor pursuits, and a social world in which Charles didn't need to explain the rules. Charles was 21. Camilla was 22. Jonathan Dimbleby's authorized biography says Charles lost his heart to her almost at once. The BBC, summarizing Dimbleby's account, describes Camilla as affectionate and unassuming. Other biographies describe their early rapport through polo, country weekends, conversation, and humor. They spent time together at country houses, including Broadlands, the Hampshire home of Lord Mountbatten. Charles was still a young prince. Camilla was still a young woman from a well-connected family. Their relationship belonged to the same world before it belonged to any public narrative. Then Charles went to sea with the Royal Navy, and Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles in July 1973. That marriage didn't remove her from Charles's life. The exact romantic chronology remains disputed. Dimbleby's authorized biography places the affair around 1986, after the marriage to Diana had irretrievably broken down. Penny Junor and other biographers place renewed intimacy as early as 1978 or 1979. The record can't support a claim that Charles and Camilla maintained one uninterrupted romance from their first meeting to their wedding. It does support something narrower and more important. Camilla remained part of Charles's social and emotional world while he continued searching for a wife. Charles's public credentials made that search look like a privilege rather than a problem. He was born on 14 November 1948, became heir apparent when his mother succeeded to the throne in 1952, received the title Prince of Wales in 1958, and was invested at Carnarvon Castle on 1 July 1969. From 1967 to 1970, he attended Trinity College, Cambridge. He initially studied archaeology and anthropology before switching to history, and he became the third member of the royal family to earn a university degree. In 1971, he began Royal Air Force training, then entered the Royal Navy. His service included HMS Norfolk, HMS Minerva, HMS Jupiter, and, in 1976, command of the coastal minehunter HMS Bronington. He played polo, appeared in uniform, flew aircraft, and moved through the inherited machinery of estates, titles, and royal duty. The press could turn those facts into a romantic advertisement without inventing anything. A United Press International report on 24 February 1981 described Charles as the world's most eligible bachelor with a roving eye for the girls, and said he had ended his search for a queen. Life had already described him as holding the title of the most eligible bachelor in the world during coverage of his 1970 visit to the United States. His education suggested competence. His military career suggested discipline. His polo suggested athleticism. His inheritance supplied wealth and status. His position as heir apparent gave every courtship the scale of a national event. The newspapers didn't need to ask whether Charles was emotionally available. The title answered the question for them. His own public language was more dutiful than romantic. In a 2013 interview with Time, Charles said that he had spent years wanting to heal and make things better. He spoke about service, obligation, and responsibility. He didn't publicly call himself a prize. The audience eventually supplied that phrase because the press had supplied all the ingredients. The first serious challenge to the bachelor myth came from women who weren't equally available to the royal script. Lady Jane Wellesley was associated with Charles in the early 1970s. She was the daughter of the Duke of Wellington and had her own career in television and film. Later accounts placed her within the circle of women considered as possible partners. A frequently repeated quotation attributes to Wellesley the question, "Do you honestly believe I want to be queen?" The evidence does not establish a formal proposal, and no primary interview securely records her refusing one. Other accounts describe the relationship as vague or simply friendly. Her case, therefore, has to remain qualified. It supports disinterest in the royal role, not a proven rejection of Charles after a marriage proposal. The distinction matters because the press routinely turned a woman seen beside the prince into a possible future queen before she had agreed to anything. Wellesley appears to have preferred her own professional life to the prospect of becoming Princess of Wales. That is evidence of non-pursuit, not a clean refusal. The public image of Charles as a man every woman wanted was already larger than the underlying record. Davina Sheffield was a more substantial possibility. In 1976, according to Penny Junor, Charles fell for Sheffield. Junor wrote that she seemed ideal in many ways, and that they appeared to be very much in love. Sheffield was the granddaughter of industrialist Lord McGowan, socially well-connected, and considered suitable enough to be invited to lunch with the Queen. Then her former boyfriend, James Beard, spoke to the press. Beard said that he and Sheffield had lived together. He described her wifely virtues, turning a private relationship into a public test of her suitability. Time later contrasted Sheffield with Diana's image as a girl without a past. Later accounts reconstructed the collapse as a palace decision based on Sheffield's sexual history. Some claimed that someone close to Charles told him that a future consort was expected to be intact. No official palace statement confirms a formal veto, and no written rule has been found. The documented facts are enough without turning the reconstruction into a palace order. Sheffield had been treated as a plausible bride. Her former boyfriend publicly disclosed their cohabitation. Afterward, her prospects as a royal bride collapsed. The standard was plainly unequal. Lord Mountbatten's written advice to Charles encouraged the future king to sow his wild oats before choosing a suitable, attractive, and sweet-charactered girl who had not been involved with anyone else. The advice was explicit about the freedom granted to the man and the pedestal demanded of the woman. Camilla lived on the wrong side of that standard. She wasn't a foreign princess waiting in a carefully managed palace household. She was a socially established woman with a romantic history, and later she became a divorcee. She was known as a person rather than presented as a blank surface. That difference made her emotionally suitable for Charles and institutionally difficult to present as a conventional royal bride. Lady Sarah Spencer offers the clearest contemporary record of a woman refusing Charles's status. Sarah began dating him in 1977 after meeting him at a Royal Ascot house party. She saw him at polo, country house gatherings, Balmoral, and a skiing trip to Cloisters. In November 1977, Charles visited Althorpe, the Spencer family estate, where he met Sarah's younger sister, Diana. The relationship was brief. Its ending became public after Sarah spoke to two journalists, James Whittaker and Nigel Nelson, during a lunch in Cloisters. Later accounts disagree about the original publication venue, but the substance of her remarks is consistently reproduced. "There is no chance of my marrying Prince Charles," Sarah said. "He is a fabulous person, but I'm not in love with him, and I wouldn't marry anyone I didn't love, whether he were the dustman or the King of England. If he asked me, I would turn him down." Sarah wasn't rejecting a documented proposal. She was publicly rejecting the possibility of marrying Charles without love, and she explicitly stated that the title couldn't compensate for its absence. The reported response from Charles was, "You've just done something extremely stupid." The relationship dissolved soon afterward. She later said of Charles and Diana, "I introduced them. I'm Cupid." The remark is often treated as a charming footnote, but it sits beside her earlier statement as one of the rare public records in which a woman linked to Charles plainly refused to treat his rank as a substitute for affection. The title didn't settle the question for her. Anna Wallace provides the strongest evidence that Charles's attachment to Camilla affected his other courtships in real time. Wallace, the daughter of Scottish landowner Hamish Wallace, was known as Whiplash Wallace, a nickname associated with her equestrian skill and fiery personality. She became one of Charles's most serious girlfriends between 1979 and 1980. Royal watchers considered her a possible future Princess of Wales, and several biographical accounts report that Charles proposed twice, and Wallace rejected both proposals. The proposals aren't supported by surviving letters or a public statement from Wallace, so they remain reported rather than independently documented. Her withdrawal from the relationship is much clearer. The first Camilla-related incident took place at the Queen Mother's 80th birthday ball at Windsor Castle in 1980. Charles reportedly arrived with Anna and spent much of the evening dancing with Camilla. Later accounts give variant versions of Wallace's response, including the line, "No one treats me like that, not even you." The quotation is secondhand. It shouldn't be presented as a transcript. The social fact is firmer. Charles was courting Anna, Camilla was present, and Charles gave Camilla most of his attention at a formal event where Anna had arrived with him. The second account comes from a separate polo-related dance at Stowell Park near Cirencester. According to Andrew Morton's Diana, Her True Story, Wallace borrowed Lady Celia Vestey's car and drove away after being left as a virtual wallflower while Charles socialized with Camilla. The two episodes shouldn't be fused. One occurred at Windsor Castle, the other at Stowell Park. The record does not show Charles literally leaving the venue with Camilla. It shows him repeatedly allowing Camilla to become the center of attention, while another woman was being presented as his potential bride. Anna withdrew. She married Johnny Hesketh later in 1980. That is an active decision, not simply a relationship that faded. It's also the point at which Camilla's role becomes impossible to describe as a romantic footnote. She was the person Charles prioritized in front of the woman he was supposedly considering for marriage. The four-woman slogan, therefore, needs precision. Anna Wallace has the strongest reported record of rejecting proposals and ending the relationship after Camilla-related humiliations. Lady Sarah Spencer publicly said she would turn Charles down if he asked, because she didn't love him. Davina Sheffield's promising relationship collapsed after her former boyfriend exposed their cohabitation, with the palace rationale reconstructed rather than officially confirmed. Lady Jane Wellesley was associated with Charles, but is only weakly documented as having resisted the role of queen. These weren't 4 identical refusals. The evidence comes from different sources, with different levels of certainty. The record does not prove 4 formal proposals, 4 independent decisions, or 4 women using identical reasoning. It proves something more useful. Charles's royal status didn't produce universal romantic consent. Some women refused him directly. Some relationships collapsed under the rules surrounding the position. One case remains largely a story of reluctance and non-pursuit. The press advertised a prize. The women encountered a complicated man. Camilla's position in that pattern was unusual because she didn't need to be persuaded by the public image. She had met Charles before he became a national marriage project. Their connection formed in the same country house world that shaped their adult lives. The evidence for their compatibility is practical rather than mystical. Camilla was born in 1947 and Charles in 1948. They shared a generation, overlapping aristocratic networks, and a familiarity with rural social life. Both enjoyed polo, horses, and outdoor pursuits. Accounts repeatedly describe their shared humor and conversational ease. Town and Country summarized the attraction by saying that they both loved polo and the outdoors and had the same sense of humor. Charles could occupy the constitutional center of the British state, but in Camilla's company, he could still be teased about taking himself too seriously. That isn't a psychological assessment, and it does not prove a perfect relationship. It does document the kind of companionship he valued: understanding, encouragement, and correction. Camilla could see the prince and the man at the same time. That is why the familiar idea of Camilla as Charles's consolation prize is misleading. The available evidence points in the opposite direction. She was the earlier attachment, the enduring confidant, and the person with whom he shared the most ordinary details of his social world. Her later official status didn't create the connection. It formalized one that had survived multiple attempts to contain it. The moral complications remain. Charles and Camilla's relationship overlapped with their respective marriages, according to multiple biographies. The chronology of renewed intimacy is disputed. Their relationship became publicly notorious through the 1993 telephone recording later known as Camillagate, and Charles acknowledged adultery in a 1994 television interview. Camilla wasn't an innocent bystander to the collapse of the Wales marriage. In her 1995 Panorama interview, Diana said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." That sentence identified the structural problem precisely. Charles had married Diana, while Camilla remained central to his emotional life. Whether Charles consciously planned to keep both relationships can't be proved from the record. The record does show continuing attachment to Camilla, a marriage to Diana, and an institutional expectation that a private relationship could remain separate from a public marriage. That expectation failed because Diana wasn't a ceremonial prop. Charles met Diana romantically in 1980. Their engagement was announced in February 1981, and they married at St. Paul's Cathedral on 29 July. Diana was 19. The ceremony drew an estimated worldwide television audience of 750 million people. Camilla attended the wedding. The public saw a complete royal picture: the heir, the young aristocratic bride, the cathedral, the uniforms, and the promise of future children. Charles had acquired the wife expected of him. The private contradiction remained in place. Diana's early years in the role brought genuine public success. She became a global figure almost immediately, and her popularity often exceeded Charles's at public appearances. Photographs from royal tours show crowds reaching toward her, newspapers following her movements, and attention shifting from the heir to the young woman beside him. Diana's popularity is well documented. The stronger claim that Charles personally resented it's less securely sourced. Later biographies interpret his discomfort, but the available record does not provide a simple confession that her fame caused resentment. The consequence does not require a confession. Charles had entered a marriage shaped around public suitability, while Diana developed a public identity larger than the role assigned to her. The palace expected a future Princess of Wales. The public found a figure with an unusual ability to create emotional connection. Camilla occupied the opposite position. She didn't need to compete with Diana in front of crowds because she had access to the private language of Charles's adult life. She knew the people, places, jokes, and routines that existed before the wedding and continued after it. Diana became the most visible person in the marriage. Camilla remained the person Charles returned to in private. That mismatch made the royal image unstable. The marriage lasted from 29 July 1981 until the divorce was finalized in 1996, approximately 15 years. Charles and Diana formally separated in 1992. Charles acknowledged adultery in 1994. Diana spoke publicly in 1995. During those years, the public narrative moved through several stages. First came the fairy tale, then came the visible strain, then the competing biographies, leaked recordings, and televised admissions that turned the marriage into a dispute over who had been betrayed and who had been entitled to what. Camilla's relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles ended in divorce in 1995. Charles and Diana divorced in 1996. The relationship between Charles and Camilla then moved gradually into public view. In January 1999, Charles and Camilla appeared together at the Ritz in London for the birthday party of Camilla's sister. In 2003, they began living together at Clarence House. Their engagement was announced on 10 February 2005. On 9 April 2005, 35 years after their first meeting, they married in a civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. The timing changed the meaning of the entire story. The woman once regarded as unsuitable eventually became Charles's official partner, but only after the marriage built around public expectation had ended, after both previous marriages had dissolved, and after the institution had accepted that the old arrangement couldn't be restored. The relationship had not been uninterrupted. It had included separation, secrecy, competing marriages, scandal, and public hostility. Its endurance does not prove that it was always healthy or morally uncomplicated. It does show where Charles's strongest continuity lay. Camilla wasn't chosen to make Charles look complete. She knew him before the role required completion. She shared his generation, his country house world, his interests, and his humor. Their constitutional positions weren't equal. Charles was heir to the throne and later became king, but their social familiarity and adult experience gave the relationship a parity that the marriage to a 19-year-old woman couldn't provide. Diana was selected for qualities that suited the public role: youth, aristocratic background, Protestant identity, beauty, and an image of innocence. Camilla offered qualities that suited Charles's private life: familiarity, conversation, shared interests, and the ability to treat him as a man rather than an institution. That is the difference between a suitable bride and a compatible partner. It's also why Charles's self-image matters. The public called him the world's most eligible bachelor. But eligibility was a measure of constitutional value. It counted his title, inheritance, education, uniform, and future crown. It didn't measure whether a particular woman loved him, trusted him, or wanted the life attached to him. Lady Sarah Spencer said she wouldn't marry him without love. Anna Wallace reportedly rejected his proposals and left after he made Camilla the center of 2 social occasions. Davina Sheffield lost a promising position after a former boyfriend made her private history public. Lady Jane Wellesley appears to have had no appetite for becoming queen, although her case can't be elevated into a proven refusal. The women don't form a perfect statistical sample. Their stories were later repeated by biographers and royal journalists, and some details remain second-hand. But together they puncture the claim that Charles's desirability was self-evident. Camilla's role is the clearest counterpoint. She wasn't the young bride selected to make the heir appear desirable. She was the woman who knew what the title couldn't hide. One audience comment under a documentary about the women who walked away reduced the entire argument to 6 words. He was a prize, in his own eyes. The line isn't historical evidence. It's a modern reaction to the historical record. Its force comes from the contrast between Charles's public packaging and the choices made by women who had actually spent time with him. The palace eventually accepted the relationship that Charles had tried to keep outside the official story. Charles and Camilla married in 2005. Charles became king on 8 September 2022. Camilla became queen consort and was crowned beside him at Westminster Abbey on 6 May 2023. The ending isn't that Camilla won a contest and Diana lost one. That framing repeats the error at the center of the story by treating women as interchangeable candidates for a royal role. Diana paid for Charles's failure to separate constitutional suitability from emotional compatibility. She entered a 15-year marriage in which the man beside her had chosen her for a public position while remaining attached to the woman who understood his private life. Camilla eventually became the official partner because the relationship with Charles rested on shared experience rather than royal fantasy. Diana had been asked to complete the image of the future king. Camilla knew the person inside it. Charles possessed the title, the education, the uniform, the horses, the wealth, and the future throne. Those qualities made him important. They didn't make him universally desirable. The women who knew him had already made that assessment before Diana said yes.